Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for a Conversation with the Coach, our webinar series today featuring Coach Sam Albert. My name is Terry Gurnett, class of 1977, and I'm the Associate Director of Athletics. Before today's webinar officially begins, I'd like to share a few Zoom tips. There will be a Q&A portion to today's event. If you'd like to ask a question, please submit it to the Q&A function that is located at the bottom of the screen. The presenter will answer questions at the end of their presentation. If you'd like to view the session with closed captions, click CC at the bottom toolbar to select Turn on Subtitles. If you're having trouble viewing the meeting, you can call in and listen using the phone number that was included in your confirmation email. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our panelist, Coach Sam Albert. Albert is in his 12th year as Director of Track and Field and Cross Country at the University of Rochester, and he has restored the national prestige of these Rochester track and cross country programs. He oversees all aspects of these programs and works primarily with the team sprinters and hurdlers during track season. Under his leadership, the program has enjoyed numerous NCAA qualifiers and won an array of team and individual conference championships. 74 Yellow Jackets have competed at the NCAA Track and Field Championships since 2009, with 30 going on to earn All-American honors. That total includes 3 individual NCAA titles from multi-event athlete Kylie Bartlett in 2017 and 18. The Yellow Jackets have excelled in the classroom as well, with 13 Rochester student athletes earning COSIDA Academic All-America recognition. The men's team has captured 3 New York State Collegiate Track Conferences and titles during Albert's tenure, and the Rochester women placed 9th in the NCAA Indoor National Championships in 2019. Yellow Jacket athletes have also won 169 individual conference titles over the past 11 seasons, spanning both the NYS CTC and the Liberty League. In cross country, the U of R women's team finished 14th at the 2015 National Championships, their first appearance as a team since 1988, and earned return trips to nationals in 2018 and 19. Men's cross country team earned 3 consecutive invitations to the NCAA championships from 2010 to 2012, finishing among the top 25 teams in the nation each year. Yellow Jacket runners have also earned 3 All-American honors in cross country since 2009, and Rochester has been represented by either a team or individual at every NCAA championship meet during that time. Albert has been honored as the Atlantic Region Coach of the Year by the USTFCCCA, and he and his coaching staff have earned the New York State Collegiate Track Coaching Men's Coaching Staff of the Year honors on 3 occasions. They are also honored as the Liberty League Women's Coaching Staff of the Year following the 2019 season. Coach Albert is also a proud Rochester graduate holding an undergraduate degree in biology and a master's degree in education from the Warner School. He also received a second master's degree from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Coach will give his remarks, then open up to Q&A. Thank you again for joining us. We hope you enjoy the presentation. Sam?
Okay, thank you very much, Terry, for those kind remarks and biography. I appreciate everyone taking the time out to participate in our webinar this afternoon. I know for most of you, it's probably lunch hour. I know we have a few people West Coast time that might just be starting off your day here. When we were kind of trying to figure out exactly what it was that we wanted to talk about in this event, and kind of what we thought you all would be interested in, what we decided upon is to kind of dial things back to last year, around this time in the winter, and just kind of tell you about what has been happening here at the University of Rochester with our track and field and cross country programs since the start of the pandemic, and the kind of the series of events and the ways that our university and our athletic department's been able to approach these really challenging times. So I have a little PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to share that'll kind of help as I go through remarks. And then after I've had a chance to kind of tell everyone a little bit about our last 10 months or so, we'll hopefully move on to a little Q&A section. And I know a couple of people had already submitted questions, but like Terry said, if you do have questions later on in the presentation, feel free to put them into the chat, and then we'll try to get to as many of those as possible. So kind of dialing things back to, last winter, we've were fortunate to have, probably one of the strongest indoor seasons we had really had in quite a long time here. It was really fantastic. Lots of new milestones for our team. We kind of wrapped up the championship season last winter we had 8 Liberty League titles from individuals and relays. There were 7 new school records set just last indoor season. Which is always a really exciting accomplishment for our student athletes when we're part of a program that has the kind of history that Rochester Track and Field has. We had 12 qualifiers to the indoor NCAA championships last year, which was a new record. It was the most student athletes we have ever sent to the same national championship meet. Probably one of the huge highlights of last season for us was both of our 4x4 relay teams made it to indoor nationals last year, which is also the first time that had ever happened where we had both the men's and women's relays go to the same meet. Our women's 4x4 in particular, they had a performance last February at Boston University. There's a little photo over to the right there that was a screenshot. But our women's 4x4 ran 3:49 last season, which actually broke the previous U of R school record by 7 seconds, and turned out to be the number 12 all-time performance in D3 history. So they were headed into the indoor national championship meet, with a very high seed, and we don't know how things could have played out, but I think they definitely could have been contenders, to fight for that national championship. Our men's 4x4 also went into nationals. They broke our school record last year and had I think top 5 or 6 time in the country going into nationals. And then we had 43 performances last season that made it onto the all-time top 10 list that we keep here in our program. So all around, it was just a fantastic season athletically. You see the student athletes also just continued a lot of the high academic accomplishment that we've had here. So quite a few Liberty League all academic honorees. We had 2 of our senior athletes last spring that were elected Phi Beta Kappa, which is, many of is the most prestigious academic honor society. And then Julia Myers, who was one of our seniors last spring, was named Academic All-American. And I think I was just going back and looking, I think it was the 7th or 8th year in a row that we've had somebody in our cross country or track program that has been named Academic All-American. So just all around, we had a great winter. We were really thrilled. And, want to kind of fast forward a little bit into the end of our indoor season in the week of March 7th. So this was kind of the week, many of you guys remember, things kind of, started to take a turn. I think it was the week that, the country and the world kind of really started to understand the severity and kind of the dimensions of this pandemic. That week happened to be spring break here at the University of Rochester, and it also happened to be the week of the indoor NCAA championships. So that's kind of where we were. We started that week, on definitely on a high, finding out that we had 12 athletes that had qualified to nationals, including our 2 relay alternates. We were taking 14 student athletes down to the national championships. As I mentioned, both of our relay teams qualified, which was thrilling. And then, right at the start of that week, the university made an announcement that we were starting to impose some travel restrictions and basically restricting travel outside of the state, trying to kind of get our minds around what was happening with the pandemic. The way this played out, we had some teams, some of our spring sport teams that had actually left for spring break trips to California and Puerto Rico and some different places. And then, and they were able to leave on maybe Friday or Saturday. And then by Saturday night, the university started restricting travel. And some of our spring teams were told, if you haven't left campus yet, you're not going to be able to go on those spring break trips. So we started to have a question at the start of that week about, would we even be permitted to travel to the NCAA championships? And obviously that was a really hard thing to start to put our heads around. Fortunately, the university made an exception and allowed us to, travel to the NCAAs because it was not, because it was NCAA sponsored travel. They understood the importance of that meet to the teams. So fortunately, we fast forward to Wednesday of that week, and we were able to head to the national championships. On the way down to North Carolina, we were actually at our layover in LaGuardia Airport, and our students all received the email announcing that U of R was going to move to remote instruction for the remainder of the semester. So again, rewinding, we were on spring break this week. Most of our students had left campus. Our students who were traveling to nationals were still around. And so on our way down to nationals, we find out that the university is going to move to remote instruction, and that students are asked to, start making preparations to move out of campus and move back home for the rest of the semester. So, obviously that was a really jarring experience. Later that evening, we were able to get some clarification and some confirmation that unfortunately all of our spring sports were going to be canceled with the decision to send students home. So we had all of a sudden our seniors who are on this trip, are thinking about their classmates and their friends who were not at nationals, who basically were figuring out that their college athletic career had come to an end, pretty abruptly. Fortunately at that moment, we still, the NCAA championships were still on. We had a meeting at the hotel, talked about where we were, and, we had 6 students with us that were seniors on this trip to nationals. And those students were resolved to make sure that they had a chance to end their college career on a really high note at nationals. So move forward to the next day. We actually had our pre-NCAA practice session, our shakeout, over at the facility that morning. Things were starting to get a little tense and stressful. The NCAA had announced that we weren't going to have spectators at nationals. They announced that there wasn't going to be a championship banquet. But for everything we could tell at that moment, we were still going to be able to have the championship meet and kind of end the academic year on that note. But we were starting to kind of hear some stories that some individual schools were making decisions to withdraw from the championship. One school in particular will always stick in my memory. They were at the facility practicing the day before the meet and got a call from the university president while they were in the middle of practice saying, you guys need to leave. The team is going to need to make arrangements and travel home, and you're not going to be competing at nationals. So that's kind of how, dynamic and fluid the situation was. But we're still moving forward, expecting that the next day we could give these student athletes the opportunity to compete. And then, at lunch that day was kind of a turning point for me. We were sitting at lunch and, I looked up at the TV and started seeing announcements that, multiple conference basketball tournaments were being canceled in Division I. The commentators were starting to talk about whether that meant March Madness, which was supposed to start the following week, would be in jeopardy. And that was kind of the moment, I think, for me, that it crystallized that, it was possible that this NCAA championship, which now was, 18 hours away from starting, was possibly in jeopardy. So unfortunately, a few hours later, we were back at the hotel and, we received this email. And at 4:17 p.m., they announced that all remaining winter and spring NCAA championships were canceled due to the pandemic. So obviously a really, really tough turn of events. As our student athletes, as our coaches, we're obviously, kind of at a loss and trying to figure out where we go from there. So, the team meeting at the hotel, was very emotional. We had not only a lot of athletes who had worked for that moment to make it to nationals for the first time, and kind of had those dreams sort of evaporate. We had a lot of seniors who, kind of had to come to terms with the fact that not only they weren't going to get a chance to compete in that national meet, but they really weren't going to get a chance to, compete again as college athletes. So, that group in particular really, stood out to me. And, what can we do to try to help support those seniors who their whole world has kind of been upended in the last few days. So, and it was definitely, I'd say is probably overall the toughest day of my coaching career in, trying to navigate what do we do in this situation that, is pretty emotional for everybody. And we don't really have much of a game plan or, a script that you're supposed to follow to deal with something like that. So, what I was really proud of during this really tough time was the way that our student athletes really stuck together. The team had plans before the banquet was canceled. Any of our alumni who have been to the NCAA championships in the past, knows that there's kind of a tradition that lots of teams have, coordinated fashion choices and outfits and stuff like that. So the team had decided going into that national meet that they, wanted to kind of have a little bit of a theme of their wardrobe for the NCAA banquet. And had gone out and gotten Hawaiian shirts, and you can see the men's shirts kind of coordinated, the women's shirts coordinated. So once we knew the meet and the banquet and stuff that had been canceled, that Thursday night when we went out to dinner, the team still decided, hey, we're going to put these Hawaiian shirts to use and, kind of have a little fun and just kind of try to, shift our mindset and make the best of the situation and enjoy, this time together. So that was one of the cool things that night. When we got back to the hotel, again, our student athletes who are not seniors, I think in particular, they were really focused and concerned, and just felt so devastated for their seniors. So they decided to throw a little impromptu graduation ceremony that evening in the hotel, which was really memorable. Included some speeches, a lot of laughter, and it was just awesome to see the way they kind of came together to support each other. So kind of moving on to that really difficult time, as a coaching staff, we kind of convened and said, where do we go from here? What do we do? There's a lot to deal with. All of this was happening obviously against the backdrop of, a really uncertain situation across our country and the world. And so, people were concerned for their families, people were concerned, and looking for guidance and what we needed to do. And for all of us as coaches, we had to figure out, where do we go from here? How do we support our student athletes? What can we put our energy into? So we kind of chose a few main priorities that, we felt were important and we needed to focus on during this time. The first and most important thing to us was just finding ways to keep our team connected. Understanding that our student athletes had been through, and our students just in general at Rochester had been through such a challenging, and difficult experience, really unprecedented situation, not only, kind of dealing with the loss of their season, but, at that time in your life, with how important obviously social relationships and your friendships are, to suddenly, be told, hey, everybody needs to leave. You don't have much time to say goodbye. Seniors, they're going to move on with their lives. We're probably not going to have a graduation ceremony for them, just a lot of different things happening. So, one of the other things we wanted to put a big premium on was really making sure that we were trying to look forward, and just, try to keep our heads up and try to, maybe the old cliche of trying to control the things we can control and start thinking through, what are the things, what is the future of our team going to look like? Maybe not spending a lot of time, kind of dwelling on the things that were lost and instead trying to really continue to chart our path forward. Obviously, and this is probably for every single person in and outside of athletics, the last 10 months has been an exercise in just trying to be adaptable and flexible and, ready to respond to constantly changing situations. And that was definitely our world here in athletics. A huge priority to me was making sure that we found ways to celebrate our seniors. I know I heard from a lot of you all as alumni, during the winter and spring and into the summer. And, one of the sentiments I continued to hear echoed from a lot of people was, oh man, those seniors, I feel so bad for them. This is how their college career kind of came to an end. And so that definitely was a huge priority for us, trying to find as many ways that we could to celebrate and recognize and honor, what that senior class of 2020 had contributed to our team. And then another huge piece of, kind of where we had to go from there was how do we recruit, in an atmosphere where, at least for the foreseeable future, we were not going to be able to have visitors on campus. usually the spring and summer is an extremely busy time for juniors rising into senior year to come and visit our campus and, meet with our coaches and see what we have to offer. And so, it was required a lot of pivot in terms of how do we approach recruiting. We had a group of 11th, now 12th grade student athletes across the country who didn't have an outdoor track season their junior year. So we had to kind of adapt and think about what is recruiting going to look like when we're sort of missing part of the data set that we would usually use to evaluate recruits and figure out, could they be a good fit here at Rochester? So, but that recruiting piece obviously continued to be a huge focus for us as we went into the spring and summer. So going back to our seniors, we spent a lot of time in the spring. I know many people on this webinar probably follow some of our team's social media. A huge emphasis for us in April, May, June was, celebrating each of the individual seniors that we had graduating, kind of having profiles about them. The athletic department, athletic communications office did some really great profiles for each sport about the graduating seniors. So that stuff was really great. A couple of the things I wanted to highlight actually were some of the student driven efforts that really came together to celebrate our seniors. So two particular things really stood out to me as I think back to last spring. So the day after we came back from the indoor national championship trip, one of our senior distance runners, Jordan Hurlbut, Jordan had made it to nationals in the 3K. She was in fantastic, phenomenal fitness, as we were kind of wrapping up that indoor season, and had some really huge aspirations for what, we thought she could accomplish at nationals. And so given that she was a senior, given that she knew she was in really, really awesome shape, she decided when she came back, she really wanted to, go out and still run a 3K, and kind of run that race that she didn't get to run at nationals. So this was something that kind of came about without, the knowledge or, organization of our coaching staff, because at this point, the staff was being told we need to stay home, people need to physically distance. But basically the day after our team returned from nationals, a group of the students who were still on campus came out to cheer on Jordan as she ran that 3K. And, just kind of that kind of came about pretty organically. And I got photos and videos of sort of the effort, and I guess most importantly, just all the people that came out on our team to kind of show support for what she was doing and, acknowledge everything Jordan had done in our program over the last few years. Jumping off of that, another group of our student athletes, got together and they wanted to do something to celebrate. Noah was one of our senior captains last year, and Noah was a javelin thrower. So we never got to outdoor season, obviously, last year. And so Noah never even had a chance to compete at all during his senior year. So after the Jordan time trial, a couple of our throwers the following day decided to organize a little, kind of impromptu javelin competition for Noah so that he could come out in his uniform and get a chance to throw one more time, before he moved on to his next phase. And somehow, and I still don't know all the backstory of how this came about, but a group of our athletes, I think somebody must have tipped off the local media. And so a reporter and a photographer from the Democrat and Chronicle came out and basically, got some footage of this javelin competition that they put together for Noah. And again, a big crowd of some of our student athletes out there cheering him on and just getting a chance to hype him up before, he kind of put a bow on his Rochester career. Well, that story ended up going, I guess, viral here first in Rochester. And then because the Rochester DNC is part of the same company that owns USA Today, it actually ended up spinning into kind of a national story. So if some of you haven't seen it, I would definitely suggest you go back. You could probably even Google Noah Chartier, University of Rochester, and this will come up. But there were some videos. It kind of spread around the country on social media, just what our student athletes did to celebrate, one of their seniors who wasn't going to get a chance to have his last season. So again, both of these things came about completely without, the knowledge with the organization of our coaches. And I think it was a fantastic testament to just the kind of students we have on our team, the kind of students we have here at Rochester that, they wanted to make sure that they properly, celebrated and recognized those seniors. So an important thing for us going into the spring and the summer, was definitely trying to help keep our student athletes connected. So we had pretty frequent, event group Zoom meetings. We had some full team Zoom meetings. Remember, most of our students basically went back home. And so they were all separated from each other. They were finishing their semester. We didn't have the benefit of being able to train together and see each other at practice every day. So we just had to find, as many different ways as we could try to keep them connected and just try to, help everybody get to the finish line of the spring semester and, make sure that they knew that they were part of this family and part of this team during that really, really difficult time. Kind of a mantra that we were using a lot last spring was, just try again, in the spirit of looking forward was, brighter days ahead, just trying to keep people positive and put our mind toward, when we were going to be able to be back together again. So moving into the fall, summer and fall, as we got into the summer, there was still quite a bit of uncertainty about what was going to happen at different college campuses around the country. Some colleges as early as June started announcing that they weren't going to bring students back in the fall, or they were going to bring very small groups of students back to campus in the fall. And so fortunately, we did get news, partway through the summer that U of R was planning to offer an on-campus fall semester. That we had obviously a lot of protocols we would need to put in place, but we were really excited to hear the news that Rochester was going to welcome students back. As the summer continued to go forward, there were some decisions from conferences about fall sports, and so initially some conferences announced that they were canceling fall sport competition. Eventually, I think it was when we got into early August, the NCAA announced that they were going to cancel all fall championships. So that kind of led to some more individual schools deciding to cancel fall sports. Fortunately at Rochester, and this is a theme I'll probably come back to, but I feel really, really fortunate that our university and our administration really understood the value of athletic participation and understood that even if ultimately we weren't able to find competition this fall, there was still value and reasons to want to get our teams together and be able to practice and be able to have team activities. And so that was really critical for us, I think, as we got into the fall semester and our student athletes kind of looked to, what was life going to be like during this really crazy fall. So like many colleges, like many workplaces, we had a lot of different safety protocols here on campus that, first and foremost allowed us to have our student population back here in person. And then secondarily, allowed us to eventually engage in varsity team activity and practices and stuff. So, the student athletes, the students, the faculty and staff here, continuing to this day, everyone who's on campus has to do a daily symptom tracker through an app called Dr. Chatbot. That allows us to kind of screen and make sure that people aren't experiencing any COVID related symptoms before they come to campus. Fortunately, with the medical resources that we have in this really amazing university, we were able to do move-in testing in the fall where every single residential student was tested as they arrived on campus. And then we didn't move people into the dorms until we could confirm that they had those negative COVID tests. And then through the semester, we had a program of random surveillance testing where students were being selected for testing all through the semester. As it relates to athletics, we were able to begin practices this fall with all of our teams. That a lot of that activity was following some NCAA guidelines that have been issued about how to resume activity and what testing and mitigation strategies we needed to employ. So we started off with a lot of small group practices early in the semester, and then as we kind of moved through the different phases, eventually we were able to have our athletes practicing in larger groups and kind of start to approach something a little bit closer to normal practice activities. And then a huge key piece of the equation for us here on campus was, masking, physical distancing, and with our sports, really anytime it was feasible for us to have 6 feet of distance, for us to keep masks on, for us to, kind of be in small groups, for us to keep activity outdoors, we would really try to do all those things to have as safe of an environment as we could. So shifting to our cross country season. So, we kind of started to realize as we got to the beginning of the semester in late August, early September, that while Rochester didn't technically cancel fall sports competition, our potential competition partners kind of evaporated because there really just were not other local schools that really were looking to do any sort of competition in person. But that didn't really change the fact that we still decided to continue moving forward with a fall season. Going through, we kind of decided to really set it up like a pretty typical fall training cycle. So our student athletes in cross country, followed a summer mileage program. They built up their mileage through the summer and into the early part of the fall. Then as we kind of got later into the fall, we kind of got into a little bit more of a competition time trial season. And we're able to kind of pull back some of the training and the mileage just like we would during a regular season. And our goal was to really just try to offer our student athletes as normal of an experience as we could, in the absence of being able to go out and compete externally against other schools. Putting a really big premium on just allowing our athletes to have the opportunity to be together with each other again. And, we could see within the first couple of days of the semester just how much life, kind of was breathed into our student athletes by being able to see their friends again. At that point, we were coming off of almost 6 months of being apart, and they were just, even with the uncertainty about competition and where things were going to go, they were really thrilled to just have a chance to train together and have their teammates around them again. Fortunately, in our sport, given the sort of objective time, characteristics of track and field, we were able to find some opportunities to have some virtual competitions this fall. So we had a couple of time trials in October into early November that we kind of set up as virtual meets. And I think we had a chance to do some competition with Vassar, St. Lawrence, Union. And then in late October, the weekend that would have traditionally been the UAA championship, some of the UAA coaches organized a virtual UAA competition where each campus basically ran 5K time trials, on their track at their campus. And then we did sort of a results merge of all the different UAA schools. So we were able to get, I think 6 of the 8 UAA schools participated in that. And again, it was just something to kind of keep the athletes engaged and excited and feel like they were working towards some external goals this fall. And the other cool thing was, I guess, about this fall is it gave us a chance without our normal, kind of grind of going from meet to meet and getting ready for UAAs and regionals and nationals. It allowed us some flexibility to kind of race some different distances over the course of the fall. So we didn't necessarily have to just run, 8Ks every week or 6Ks or 5Ks every week. And so over the course of the fall semester, our cross country teams were able to kind of test themselves in some different distances. And I thought they had a lot of fun with that. So here's just some photos of one of our time trials we did, I think in mid-October. We ended up doing a couple evening time trials so that athletes could run under the lights. And that was, they really got behind that. Here were some results from a couple of our virtual, 5K that we ran through the season. Shifting over to track and field. So we were able to start track and field practice this year in late September. The NCAA kind of gave some flexibility to schools this year about our playing and practice season that actually allowed us to get started a little bit earlier in the fall than we typically would. So most of you probably remember that in a normal season, we typically start practicing for indoor track and field like in late October. So by starting in late September this fall, it really gave us a few extra weeks of training and some nice weather and just kind of taking advantage of really, really nice fall conditions here in Rochester. We were practicing about 4 to 5 days a week with the track and field athletes. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of small group activity, which lends itself pretty well to our sport. Obviously in track and field, we already have all of these different event groups, and we aren't necessarily looking for everybody on the team to be at practice at the exact same time. so some of the COVID restrictions really didn't negatively impact us too badly in track and field. We were really able to do a lot of things that we would typically do. Probably the biggest change is that we just really tried to keep almost all of our activity this fall outdoors. Just looking at the lower risk that you're looking at in outdoor activity versus indoor activity. And again, just offering opportunities for them to be together and to kind of get back into that training mode and start working toward their future goals with one another. So that was a huge emphasis for us. So there's just a few videos that I thought I'd share of just kind of what track and field practice looked like this fall, with some of our pandemic restrictions. So you see on the left, a couple of our sprinters, very early on, we were doing some hurdle hop activity, some light plyometrics. We had some throwing practice going on the right. Here was a video from one of our pole vault practices. There's Madeline's one of our sophomore pole vaulters. Clip of we were doing some sprint mechanics work, so kind of some slow motion video as Gabe was running over some wickets. And then kind of looking ahead, like what does the spring look like? That's a question I've kind of been hearing a lot from alumni that I've talked to. We're still getting that question from some of our student athletes who are on the team right now, parents. So our student athletes actually start returning to campus in about the next week or so. U of R, like many schools, decided to push back the start of our spring semester a little bit. So we are scheduled to start classes here on February 1st. So our student athletes are kind of just starting the process of returning to campus. Again, we'll be testing every student as they move back to campus. And then we'll have ongoing surveillance testing during the semester. So in terms of our indoor season, our conference, the Liberty League, already has announced that they canceled the indoor championship. At the Division III level, I think the majority of the Division III conferences out there have already kind of made decisions not to have indoor championship meets. But individual schools are still trying to make determinations about whether they might have some competition opportunities beyond just sort of the traditional championships. There still has not been an announcement about whether or not the NCAA will have 2021 winter and spring championships. So that's still kind of a to be determined. But here, at U of R, our plan, even as it stands today, is we are looking to hopefully engage in some limited competition for the winter season. So our hope right now is looking for some partners and some opportunities in late February and early March. We have some campus travel restrictions in place here. Obviously, everybody's still, kind of working through managing COVID transmission on their campus and stuff. We had I think on the whole, our university had a really successful fall in-person semester. And I think we learned a lot of great lessons about, the strategies and the sacrifices that we need to make in order to have this work successfully. And so that's kind of how we're approaching the spring semester is we know what works. We're going to continue to double down on those things and have the right precautions in place. And our goal is to hopefully, get our student athletes a chance to get out there and compete as we get into the later winter and the spring. I think, I've talked to a lot of people kind of individually about this, but I think, my expectation is, assuming we are able to compete, I think our season's going to look a little different this year, and we're going to see a return to probably a lot of dual and tri type meets at first. And I think over the years, the trend in college track and field has been like these larger and larger invitationals. And probably due to a lot of the COVID situation, the pendulum probably will swing back a little bit in that regard. And so I think maybe for some of our older alumni, they'll probably be kind of excited to hear that, like, hey, we're going to actually maybe have some dual meets in college track again, because that's kind of had become a relic here in college. But, most immediately, we're really looking at a lot of the local schools, trying to, when we do start to compete again, kind of staying very, very close to home, kind of using that as a little bit of a test run to see how it goes, not only, that makes travel a little bit easier, but we also have some really close partnerships with, a lot of the local institutions around us. And so just working through some shared understanding about how we can safely engage in athletic competition and stuff, we're really hopeful that's going to work for us. And then as we get into the spring, we're definitely still very hopeful that all of our spring sports here at Rochester will have a chance to compete on the regular. Obviously, when you look at just the general dynamics of COVID, outdoor activities tend to carry a little bit lower risk than indoor activities. So I think people feel a lot more optimistic about the ability to safely offer, some of our spring sports. But again, I think in track and field, it'll still probably mean as we get into the spring, looking at some smaller meets and looking at a lot more competition with, the RITs and Genesеos and Brockports and Nazareths and the schools that are kind of in our closer bubble, at least for the short term. So I just wanted to finish kind of my presentation part of it with a few acknowledgements. So, one of the main groups of people that just really deserves props is our sports medicine staff. They really have been they've been the point people, and our head athletic trainer, Eric Rosen in particular, in sort of being our liaison with UHS, working with our NCAA protocols, communicating with all the different coaches of all the different coaching staffs and sports, trying to figure out, how do we safely re-engage in varsity practices and eventually look forward to hopefully competition. I can't say enough about, the way that they've made possibilities for us and for our student athletes this year. And, including right now going into this spring semester, Eric has probably been the busiest person in our athletic department over the last 10 months. And it feels, I think, really great for all of our coaches to know that we have such a professional and top-notch staff there that's been leading the way and helping us do this safely. George Vanderswag, our athletic director, and his senior staff, have been phenomenal. I think in an environment where we've seen a lot of peer institutions be very quick to cancel and very quick to say, we can't do this and we can't do that. It's been really encouraging to be at a school where, our leadership's mindset here has been, let's look for what we can do. Let's look for opportunities. Let's look for how we can engage our student athletes safely. And they've been able to, George in particular has been able to advocate to our university, leadership, why it's important to have these opportunities for our student athletes. What is the value of varsity athletics, even if we can't compete in the short term, why we still want to be able to engage our student athletes. And so having someone, at the helm of our department, leading the way and looking for ways to, find paths forward and looking for opportunities for our athletes rather than looking for reasons to cancel, has been really, really encouraging to me all through this pandemic. And I expect that to continue going forward. I wanted to give a shout out to the rest of our coaching staff. Eddie Navarra, our distance coach, Barb Hartwig, our assistant director, Jay Petch, our jumps and multi coach, and Paul Rose, our throws coach. They've had to, they've been right by my side, helping, lead our student athletes, helping us continue to find a path forward in this environment that, again, like I said earlier, no one really has a game plan for how we're supposed to approach this. And having, staff that is top notch and professional by your side has definitely made that a lot easier for me personally. And then finally, just our student athletes. I, even prior to the pandemic, I knew how fortunate I was to work at an institution like this. I'm obviously biased being an alumnus of this school, but I think our university attracts first-class people. And, I think the last 10 months has just only reinforced that to me. Just the way our student athletes have managed this unthinkable situation. And instead of, putting all their energy into being down and disappointed and frustrated about the things they can't do, they've continued to take the approach of like, tell us what we can do, tell us what you need from us, and we're going to do it because we want to be together. We want to, have a chance to be with our team and to engage in whatever activity we can. And the way they've just been ready to roll with the punches and sort of, handle whatever gets dealt to them is just, it's been amazing to watch. And it's been really encouraging, and reinforcement to me of how important, varsity athletics is, even when we don't have the chance to necessarily go out and compete right now. So, so just kudos to the student athletes we work with here at Rochester. So that's kind of the end of my formal part of the presentation. I'm hoping now that we can shift over, and hopefully field some questions, and just hopefully that gave all of our alumni and parents and students that are on the call a chance to just see what the last 10 months has looked like for us. So so with that, I guess I'll hand it back over to Terry and Ashley.
Thank you. All right, we're going to start our Q&A portion. If anyone does have any questions that they would like to ask Coach, I ask you to submit them in the Q&A that is located at the bottom of your screen. I'm going to start off with one that was submitted in advance. Coach, can you tell us who your favorite mentor and or favorite coach is and why?
Yeah, I have a lot of different favorite coaches, so it's hard to pinpoint one person, but I think two coaches in particular that I guess I would consider mentors and definitely inspirations for me. So first of all, Mike Ford was my assistant coach that kind of coached me directly when I was here as a student athlete, and Mike went on, after he left Rochester, Mike went on to become the associate head coach at Baylor University, and he's been there for about 20 years. And Mike continues to this day to be a really, really close friend of mine that, we talk every few months. I kind of, still love to just, bounce ideas off of him, hear about what's going on down at Baylor and in the Division I universe he's in. But one of the reasons I say Mike is kind of an inspiration and a mentor to me is Mike, I always looked up to him when I was a student athlete in what a sort of easygoing, athlete first mentality that he kind of brought to coaching. And that, kind of that easygoing, even keeled, try not to get too high, too low type of mentality is definitely something, as I became a coach, that I wanted to try to bring to my practice as a coach. The other two people, I think, the previous two men's coaches here, Coach John Izzo and Coach Tim Hale, I had a chance to be on the team under both of them. Coach Hale was my freshman year of college was his last year here at U of R before he retired. So, I had a chance to kind of start my career with one of the legends of track and field here at Rochester, and that was awesome. And then Coach John Izzo, offered me my first opportunity to be a coach. And then, 10 years later, I had a chance to come in here after Coach Izzo retired and sort of take the reins of the program and stuff. So, to this day, he's somebody that, still, I talk to and is a mentor of mine. And, I try to get as much advice as I can from him, and how to deal with different situations that come along. So.
Thank you for sharing. Next, we have a couple of questions as they pertains to alumni. We have quite a few alumni on the call currently, and they want to know, how can they help you in the program?
First and foremost, continuing to send along those messages of encouragement and support. The last year, I think some of you guys, as you send those notes, you're probably like, oh, coach is super busy. I don't even know if they noticed this. A lot of times when I do get those messages from our alumni, I actually will pass them along to, some of the student athletes in our program because, I guess in my particular position of being an alumnus of our program, that connection from, the previous generation to the present generation is really important to me. So, continuing to kind of send along that support. When we eventually get to the other side of the pandemic, coming to the in-person activities here, again, I don't know if you all realize how inspiring and awesome it is for not only me, but all of our student athletes to see the alumni continue to come back to, our alumni meets, Meliora weekend, our Yellow Jacket cross country invitational, but we have a presence every single year at those events. And so obviously some of you, it's easier to get back here than others. But if you can make it back to campus, once we kind of open campus again to people, that's huge. Again, and just making those connections and, not only the personal connections where our student athletes get a chance to meet many of you, but honestly, just your presence at those events, I think sends the message to our current student athletes about, there are people out there who were in this program before you, and they care about, what you're doing, and why this is important. And I think that, that only, to me, develop stronger alumni in the future when our current students are seeing kind of the support they have from the alumni. And then, the last little plug I'll put in is, through these really, really difficult times, with the pandemic, it's been amazing to see our financial support that has continued to stream in from our alumni. So we have our HAIL fund, an endowed fund and donor advised fund that helps us support really awesome travel opportunities. We have our annual funds that many of you continue to donate to every year. So if you're in a position to be able to do that, then, continuing to kind of give us that support is obviously always really helpful. I think many of our recent alumni realize that a lot of the really cool, most memorable experiences that they had here were made possible by, a lot of that support and a lot of those special funds that we have that, have allowed our spring trips to happen, our trips to Boston and New York to happen. So, but it really, there's so many ways for our alumni to support the program. It doesn't have to just be, that financial support, as much as that is certainly appreciated. And then I guess the last thing I'd say with our alumni too is I've had a few of you who have kind of tipped me off to, people that are in your town that, you see, either, personally, or, hey, there's this kid that's an 11th grader down where I live and they're running some pretty amazing times. And I heard that, they're a fantastic student. Maybe you want to reach out to them. So, some of those alumni connections have definitely led to some great recruiting prospects for us as well. So, it's really an all of the above approach. I appreciate your support any way you guys can help us out.
Thank you. It's certainly been a difficult year for all students, but in particular for freshmen. We're interested to know, how do you onboard new freshmen onto the team? Are there any unique experiences created for freshmen coming in, especially in the social distance world?
Yeah, I think, it's been challenging, and there's really no way around that. I think that it's another example though of where, being a varsity athlete is a really beneficial thing for students in college and in a program like ours. I say this even during, sort of pre-pandemic years, that, for those first year students, when they're a member of a varsity team, I think it does immediately help connect them to a community and to a group of people. I remember as a freshman in college just feeling like the first month or two, you don't know anyone and you're having to kind of, make your new friendships and figure out where you belong on campus and who are going to be the people you spend your time with. And, I always say, I think our varsity athletes kind of have an advantage in that. I saw this fall with our cross country athletes, the freshmen could immediately start to train and practice and be together with, with our team and with their upperclassmen teammates. And I think that, I really do believe that really helped them along. Our track and field athletes were able to start practice, as I mentioned earlier, a little bit earlier in the fall. So that kind of helped that process along. But, there's no way around the fact that, it's been a challenging semester for all of our students in sort of staying connected and having those social relationships that we know are so important in college. And I've said to a lot of people, I think that the having sanctioned varsity practice activity this fall for many of our students was kind of a saving grace to them, because in this environment where they were being told all day long, limit your interactions, don't be in groups of people, don't, got to stay to your social circle, like being able to come to practice every day and sort of have authorized, sanctioned social activity for a lot of them, they told us like track was, it always is a huge thing to me, but this semester it was, that much more valuable, because for an hour and a half or 2 hours, I was allowed to be around my friends and I wasn't being told like, stay away from everybody and don't do anything and stay in your room with the lights off and the computer on. So, that's an exaggeration, but I think, to me, it only reinforces how important varsity athletics is, in particular to that first year student cohort that, have gone through an experience that obviously is unlike, anything any of us alumni or any of even our upperclassmen students have ever experienced. So.
Thank you. We are running out of time. There was many really great questions submitted. So I do want to let everyone know that we will be following up with them individually. But real quick, I would like to read one submission that isn't a question, but a kudos to Coach. Hi, Coach. This really isn't a question, but more of a message for everyone listening. I was on the Nationals trip last year, and Coach gave us a lot of credit for how we handled this situation. However, Coach has not given himself enough credit because without him as a guiding source of information and leadership, we would have been totally lost. He really did an amazing job at organizing last-minute travel plans, holding on with travel agents for multiple hours. He did an amazing job of supporting us as we tried to celebrate in our own ways. So thanks again, Coach, for all that you did and continue to do. With that, I'll turn it over to Terry to close us out.
Thanks.
Coach, thank you very much for your presentation. We really appreciate it. It's really easy to see why and how you've been so successful. Well done. Thanks to everybody for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed it too. A special thanks to our moderator, Ashley Steves Doherty. Great job again, Ashley. And we thank you all for your continued support of Rochester Track and Cross Country, and invite you to contact Coach directly if you have any further questions. Have a great day. Thank you, and go Jackets.